All right, so let's talk about what matters and what doesn't for a job interview. And for the sake of keeping this conversation as engaging as possible, I prepared 10 elements, 10 items. 5 of them do matter and 5 of them don't matter. And by the way, feel free to drop comments in the below the video if you have different opinions for these things. Now, the first thing I want to talk about, it's probably an easy one, in advance preparation, whether this makes or doesn't make a difference for a successful candidate. And I believe there's no doubt that yes, it does make a difference for an on-site interview. It's actually one of the best predictors of success in an on-site interview. The only place you want to be careful with in advance preparation is for a phone interview. In other words, not over-prepare for that interview and properly assess the importance of that event. In other words, even if it's your dream job for a dream company, it's not worthwhile spending 3 months preparing for a phone interview. So that would be my only note. But yes, long story short, in advance preparation is very useful. Number 2, is it important to prepare written answers in advance and cheat sheets for a job interview? Now, if you asked me this question probably 2 years ago, when I knew much less about this interviewing process, especially with corporation, I would have said yes, definitely yes. Because, it gives you more confidence, it gives you actually better preparation for these things. However, the more I talk to people, the more confused and challenged I am on this one, because I only know one person who actually got a job using cheat sheets and actually by reading their answers from their cheat sheet during the actual interview, and that was for a very, very senior role. Like, that person was able to read those answers from their cheat sheet as if he was speaking them out loud, and he had no problem communicating, and he attended some pretty special universities, and he was really someone with super smart and an exceptional candidate. I'm not even sure that it's those cheat sheets that made the difference, but he did use those cheat sheets successfully. I coached him and I know him. However, I probably talked to maybe 1,000 candidates, and that's the only one I know who used those cheat sheets successfully and for whom he said yes, it made a difference. What happens with these cheat sheets is the most common approach is that people spend too much on this because it feels comfortable. It feels comfortable writing your answers. It feels comfortable preparing, to cheat or to have that feeling, a little bit of a push of adrenaline during the interview. But there's this thing, which is actually a time sink. And there's the other problem in a job interview. The best job interviews are the ones with questions you have not prepared for. So it's most interviews, it's inevitable you will get a question for which you haven't prepared for. And what happens then? Well, unfortunately, the most likely scenario is for you to block. So this is why cheat sheets are a very dangerous thing. And in my experience, they do not make a difference in job interviews. So I'll discourage you from investing too many resources in these things. Number 3, English speaking skills. Now, English speaking skills are something that there's an entire industry around people willing to help you to speak English correctly and speak better and without too much and so on and so forth. However, for a job interview, especially with a high-performing company where you're not supposed to be, in customer support or to have direct contact with your customers, where it's obvious you need this, or in public relations, English-speaking skills do not matter. And I can give you an example of a candidate I coached, which I understood only 50% of the words that they were saying. However, those 50% of the words were so well chosen that I didn't understand what the idea he wanted to transmit. And he does work for a well-known company, and he's very happy in this role 2 years later or 1.5 years later. So English speaking skills is something you should not worry about. I would even argue that the more you prepare, the better. The more you prepare, for your own thing, to know your own thing better, the better you'll become at speaking English inherently. And let's admit it that these days, English is the de facto language used. So it's impossible for you not to speak English if you think about it, especially if you're applying for these high-paying jobs. Number 4, taking your time to listen to whatever the interviewer is saying, no matter how long the question is during the interview. So using your listening skills during an interview. And this is also one that at first you might think is debatable, because, you know, if they have a long question, why not spend 1/3 of that time until you understand the question to listen to them, and the other 2/3 to think about what's the best answer for them. And again, my experience has taught me that it's far more important to study your interviewer, to use your listening skills to understand what they're actually asking you, when compared to you producing the answers even before they expect you to do so. Why is that? Because many times during job interviews and many times during an interview, the goal of each party is to understand the other party as good as possible, to see whether they're the best possible job fit. Whereas if you help them, if you know exactly what they're looking for, you can play exactly as they would like you to play on. And you're not likely to understand this if you only spend the time to listen to 1/3 or even half of the question that they ask you, but rather the entirety of that question, and, you know, even further, while you speak out your answer, to look at them and to try to listen to whatever they're saying or what direction they're giving you. So listening for the entire question and only then doing something else, you know, brainstorming for the best possible answer, is something hugely important and hugely underrated for a job interview. So listening skills are very, very important here. Number 5, your attitude. Your attitude during a job interview. Now, attitude means different things to different people. But to give a couple of examples, if in a phone interview, you lay back like this and you start talking relaxed, and the tone of your voice decreases, and the number of words you choose decreases as well, you are likely to sound less engaged. If you lean forward, you are likely to sound more engaged, because, you know, you are more into the conversation. There are actually leadership principles at Microsoft, for example, energy. They are looking for candidates who generate energy. And these principles are actually built by experts. And I know from experience, yes, energy does make a difference in a job interview. So yes, your attitude matters. There's also, you know, a little bit of a word of caution here, in the sense that you don't have to be too energetic. So I always advise people to be cautiously optimistic in a job interview, but energy in terms of attitude is something you always want to transmit. And this can be challenging, you know, if you have an interview of 6 hours, but it's something you want to keep in mind, or it's something that will make a difference ultimately. Number 6, your CV. And I'm talking here your CV past the CV screening round. Now, how important is the CV after the screening round? Truth be said, there will be some interviewers who will see your CV for the first time during an on-site interview. However, from experience, that second version of your CV, the first problem with this is, you know, to spend time with your CV after you pass the first filtering round, is that second version can be not as good as the first. And this happens quite a lot. Why it happens? Because you overthink. Because you have a natural inclination to spend time on what's easy for you, to what you feel more comfortable doing. In other words, why would you prepare to your failure stories when you could, you know, have a better CV written down? Or why would you role play with, I don't know, some coach, or pay someone, or use my free role play service with some unknown person, when, you know, you could spend some time to improve your CV? So in my experience, tuning up your CV for an on-site interview is a time sink most of the time. Now, to be said, you know, if you have a couple of typos in that CV, yes, you can fix that, but that's, you know, 15 minutes, half an hour, even to make six copies for each of the interviewers. But still, the CV, no, in my opinion, it's not something that counts for an on-site interview. in this case. Now, number 7 here, and this one is a little bit linked with the previous one, emotional intelligence, like reading the room in an interview, and this connects very well with your listening skills while the interviewer is asking you something, but this refers to the event after. In other words, as you speak out your answers, to still be very careful on how they react, because people are human beings. We are human beings, and we have a natural tendency to see when something is not right. We do like, oh, it's not very right. Whereas if you look upwards, you won't spot that. So the best possible candidates you'll find, the best possible interviewees you'll find, are also the ones that are the best with these things at emotional intelligence. Of course, I'm talking here about the candidates who already are well qualified for the job and who actually prepared a little bit in advance for these interviews. But emotional intelligence and listening skills, yes, these are things that definitely do make a huge difference, and I've learned this through time. Number 8. Does it matter to have prompt answers to any question you're asked during a job interview? No, it does not. And again, if you asked me this 2 years ago, I would have probably said, yes, it definitely matters that you are sharp, you are everything, you are show them that you really want the job. However, what happens here is that there are many other things you can do that will add you probably more value than to be prompt with your answer for any question. Such as, the ones that I previously mentioned, to spend the time to think on what they're actually asking you, to use your listening skills at first, and only then think about what's the best possible example you want to give. The other thing is what happens in a real life situation in an on-site interview is that instead of using your first best story, you will use the second best story, simply because you didn't spend those two extra seconds to think, hey, is this the best story that I have? Then you probably use the second best story, and it's going to be the second best answer that you have. And there's only that much room to use these stories in a conversation. So in my opinion, it's not as important to be prompt in your answers as it's important to give the best possible answers, and of course not to give too much delay into that conversation, especially for a behavioral interview, because for a behavioral interview, they want to see at your past experience to predict your future behavior. Whereas if you don't remember your past experience for more than, 5 or 10 seconds, that's a question mark, that maybe you didn't prepare enough, or maybe something is wrong. They're trying to make things up. So, so it's still important that you have answers, but I would say if you stay for 5 seconds saying nothing, that's perfectly fine in this scenario of behavioral interviewing. Number 9, dress code. Is it important how you dress for an interview? Yes, for 1% of the interviewees, it does make a difference. And I'm talking about director level roles and senior managers, not even senior managers, I would say only director level roles. But yes, it does make a difference because, it's part of, your overall, it's considered as part of your overall performance. However, for the other types of roles, it's no longer considered as part of your overall performance, except if you dress the wrong way, like if you dress really, really bad, or if you dress too formal for a developer, then yes, you're gonna raise some question marks. But if you dress normally, you have nothing to be afraid of. And I would even encourage you to use what you consider as normal, not what you see on the internet as being the new normal on how you dress. No, you be yourself, and you'll be fine. So dress code does not matter as much as you would think for a job interview. And I know this because I'm getting asked this question every other day. So, all right. And finally, last but not least, making sense in a job interview. Making sense in a job interview is something that will make or break the deal for a technical role in particular, but also for many roles these days. Why am I saying this? And this might seem quite obvious to you, but obvious to you that making sense is super important. But You'll be surprised how many candidates stick to a template such as the star answer when compared to making sense with their answer. Now, of course, ideally you should do both, but the order of importance is making sense and then the star answer, not the star answer and then making sense. So there's this tendency of templating and fitting into a box, fitting into a template, when compared to being, making sense ultimately. So that's why I'm saying that making sense in a job interview is one of the most underrated things, together with listening skills, and you should be very careful about ensuring that your story makes sense also how you say it, not only in your head. And I know this because it's a huge challenge when you have to prepare, 20 stories for an interview, and then during the heat of the moment, you maybe communicate this in the wrong way because you keep in mind the STAR method, you keep in mind, what the interviewer is saying or what they're actually telling you to go faster, to go slower. So that's what I'm saying, making sense when communicating with someone is the most important thing by far. So if your story makes sense for the question you're getting asked, then you're always going to be fine. So these would be the 10 elements, the 5 that matter and 5 that don't. And last but not least, I wanted to also give a couple of shout outs to the people that took the time to share their interview outcomes with me in June. The first one is from, give me a moment, Sangmi. I'm also one of the people who got an offer from Amazon last year, and I plan to start working in Amazon soon. These videos help me to think more logically, and I also watch your YouTube before dreaming my dream. So that's a very nice one. Thank you very much. As Amin, thank you so much for your videos. I have received an offer today, and this comment was how to pass a behavioral interview. In case you're wondering which videos are some of the most efficient in these cases. Then I used your videos to prepare for a job at Amazon. I was successfully hired. Thank you for what you do. This is for GCQB13 for overcoming interview fear, which is another video that received quite interesting attention. Street Smart. Then I'm thankful to you. Your content and behavioral interviews at Amazon is really awesome. I made use of the content. Happy to say that I cracked the Amazon Cloud Architect role. Appreciate your efforts being helping the candidates. So cloud architects in AWS. Praful, I received an offer from Amazon. I would like to thank you for your videos on how to prepare for Amazon leadership principles. It was super helpful. Thanks a lot. And finally, Mauro, watching your videos, I cracked the AWS interviews and got an offer. So there you go. This would be some of the feedback that I received. Again, I hope you found these tips useful to help you to tune up your preparation for a job interview. And thank you very much for watching.